Hello everybody, this is Hero and I'm here with a Way of the Four Elements Monk guide. This guide is going to have two major pieces to it. One, just general conversation about Way of the Four Elements Monk, and two, specifically my reasons for choosing this for the shove build that I've been doing, where I basically just shove everything off of the ledge in all kinds of various ways. So let's get into it and enjoy. I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about class, spec, these kinds of things, abilities, and then really dovetail into a conversation about saves. So, what sort of stats are involved in actually performing our skills, and what kinds of ability saves do enemy creatures perform to resist it, as well as I'm going to talk about action versus bonus action and how important that is to Monk. Here at the beginning, I'm just going to respec my character so you can see what's going on here. We are going to pick Monk, and I'll talk a little bit about what the purpose of Monk is in a battlefield. This is your class that doesn't really need anything except its skin to do any damage, and its attacks are going to scale off of dexterity if dexterity is higher. And this is relevant for certain kinds of gameplay. Specifically, it allows you essentially to avoid the strength stat if you don't want to do the sort of one-hit monk build, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But this, gives you some flexibility on your abilities. Makes dexterity a very important stat for us. Also, our martial arts mean that we can eventually, as we scale up our level, do mostly unarmed attacks. So we have a lot of unarmed attacks like Flurry of Blows, and later on a few offhand bonus actions that come about when you do a normal hit. These are all relevant for the way that the monk works. On the defensive side, it's also gaining from the wisdom modifier. So in both cases, this is a class where you are taking two attributes and you are moving their traditional role out of that space into another one. So, Constitution, having high health, being able to wear and wield heavy weaponry and armor are all out of scope for Monk. Instead, we want dexterity to scale our damage, and we want wisdom to scale our armor class. That's the main feature of it. So here, if you're not doing a strength monk build, which I'll mention later, what you want is high dex and high wisdom, as I just mentioned. Intelligence, charisma, less relevant. Strength is actually kind of important for shoving, but I'll explain why I don't pump it for specifically my shove build. You are going to have worse time in terms of roll, so you don't want your monk, if you have a party, to be the guy that talks to people too much. Monk does have some useful interactions as far as healing or aid or sort of mental health, anything that's related to those sorts of dialogues. You will often get options that are for monk, which is fine. But if you're trying to do arcana, history, religion checks, just be aware that you're going to be fairly deficient. If you're trying to persuade things, you'll have to find other ways than the traditional charisma rolls, so you'll have lower rolls. In terms of skill proficiencies, um, I've chosen stealth and acrobatics. Acrobatics is almost a useless stat, I have to be clear, but there are a few things that it's good for my shove build specifically, which is why I've chosen it over grabbing something like religion or insight or history, which are the other major options given that my background I've chosen athletics and survival, and my race gives me intimidation. So the other options are worse. That's why we're taking acrobatics in my build. But I would say that all that acrobatics is really saying is if your character is on a slippery surface, how likely are they to be affected by it? If your character gets shoved or gets grappled with in a melee, how effective are they at resisting those things? Which actually happens to be kind of relevant for the shove build, since you're often waiting a turn trying to group mobs up to shove them all off the. Other than that, stealth is quite important for the shove build as well, since you want to position yourself well. Sometimes you have to go into the red areas where mobs can see you. Stealth check will be performed. So that's why these are here for my build. All right, let's get out of here. All I want to talk about for those parts. Now let's go to level up and I'll show you the different builds. Level 2, we're just getting standard monk things, which introduce a really interesting gameplay piece that I want to talk about. Patient Defense is really a lovely defensive piece if you need to stay in melee for all monk specs. Awesome use of a bonus action. Step of the Wind and Disengage are really relevant, and I want to explain this in the context of action versus bonus action. This is how the game is designed for all classes. Bonus actions are things like using potions, using a kind of minor skill, these little things. And Monk is designed so that it offers across a couple of layers spells that duplicate the effect of either standard actions or standard bonus actions. And what I mean by that is, in this case, Dash is a great example of a spell that actually exists as a normal action. Every class can use Dash. Enemy mobs use it all the time to close the distance. So you're giving up your main attack so that you can pursue movement. What Monk is saying is, hold on a second, you have the flexibility to do that out of the bonus action slot if you want, instead of the action slot. So you can press this and essentially gain dash. You can move a long way across the battlefield and still use your main attack. Does that make sense? Disengage is the way that we manage being in melee. Melee is a difficult spot to be if you are surrounded by enemies, because anytime you move, opportunity attacks are given to the opponent. So you'll see a little red reticle on the ground, an arrow telling you if you're going to move your character out of this range, this mob will have a strike against you. This is bad news for a monk, because you have your sort of paper. If you get hit, even though we have good armor class with wisdom, we're not tanky in the way that a paladin would be, or a warrior type class would be, with huge shields and big health pools. Instead, we want to use our movement to get out of the way. And disengage and other mechanics like it allow you to get out of that space without incurring that piece. So this is all really useful core pieces for what the monk is doing. In addition to that, we're going to get a lot of movement speed just by wearing our normal kit, which is no armor, just cloth stuff. On we go. At level 3, we get our spec. So the subclasses for Monk are Way of the Shadow, kind of your roguey subclass. Open Hand, kind of your warrior or melee damage class. And Way of the Four Elements, which is more your caster or magic class. Way of the Shadow is really good for a couple of things. Certain kinds of utility, like specifically silencing spellcasters, so locking down any mages or other spellcasters, and isolating targets with Shadow Arts and Darkness. This is like, Rogue's Bomb. You put your bomb on the ground, nothing can shoot into it, so it gives you a lot of safety. You can lock down that one target and blow them up. Really cool stuff. They have more stealth options too, so you can index out of stealth if you want to grab this stuff, because you can guarantee that you evade in the middle of combat any detection. I haven't found it that useful. I have swapped into a bit, and I haven't found I needed the extra stealth, but this is also just a lovely way to play Monk. The more common one, we have the Open Hand. This is your damage profile Monk, so what you really want to be doing is smashing things, and this scales really nicely with a couple of other effects. So I didn't talk about race. Obviously, I'm a half-orc monk, and I'll mention why in a second. But if you choose, I think it's halfling or gnome, one of those two, you get an ability that makes it so that your one die rolls are re-rolled, and you have a lucky crit chance. What that means is for any unarmed attack, which is a dice that has 4 sides, so 1d4, you are going to have a 25% chance to automatically not use that one roll. So if you roll 4-sided dice, there's a 25% chance that it's a 1. You counter that by your race, making it so that you re-roll that 1. Now you're rolling essentially a 2d4 for your unarmed attacks, which is amazing for Monk. You combine this with heavy strength in the Tavern Brawler, which we'll come to in a minute, you can do some really deadly melee damage. So Flurry of Blows, Way of the Open Monk is really excellent. Way of the Four Elements is your caster monk, and I want to talk about the utility that you get out of this. Essentially, you get access to 3 spells from this spell list. You can make a block of ice, you can do like Chromatic Orb, Burning Hands, Shocking Grasp, these sorts of things. You can throw ice, and you can do ranged fire damage. But you also get Fist of the Four Thunders, Fist of Unbroken Air, Rush of Gale Spirits, and even Water Whip, which are really interesting utility pieces and help me for the shove build to make it work. This essentially says, for me, shove is now an AoE ability for 2 of these spells, or a ranged ability for this spell. I'll show you the reticles when we go back to the game, but this is sort of a large rectangle. This one is a long line, so you can aim at wherever, what your needs are for the kind of mob that you're dealing with. And we'll also talk about saving rolls and how that's important for how these all play out. But in any case, you get these really strange spells, and I'm going to talk about how I use them for shove. Level 4, we get access to some range defense, so anything, or slow fall, excuse me, range defense is later. And we get access to new feats. So this is where I was talking about if you want to do the melee damage monk build, Tavern Brawler with a, I think it's either a halfling or a gnome, I forget which one, is going to be the way you want to go, and then pump strength. The strength is going to now modify your melee damage, and it just crushes. Really fun. And then you get obviously a bonus to your strength or constitution. But what we're going to be doing is taking ability improvements for most monk builds, and this just gives you bonus stats with monk, which monk uses really well, especially pumping your dexterity. You get wisdom as well for defense. You can have really high armor classes, and obviously strength if you need, better athletics checks if you need to push things more, these kinds of pieces. I find my strength, I kind of get a bonus strength from an item I'm wearing, so I don't really need this as much. So I just pump dexterity, be a little more sturdy. Strength is probably something I'm going to index into a little more as I get further into the campaign, because I'll want to push things further. So your opportunity to be close to a ledge is harder in certain parts, so you'll want to pump strength so that you can actually complete an athletics check and launch things further. But we'll get. Finally, you get the core monk abilities, Stunning Strike, which is insane, except for the fact that it's a constitution save. So this is why people don't play monk, by the way. The main core piece of monk is being able to lock down single targets with stuns, and since we have, through extra attack, 2 opportunities in every given turn, we can essentially perma-stun things for a long time. Incredibly strong, except for the fact that the targets you usually want to stun are the boss targets, like Marcus, and he has an insane constitution roll. Other bosses, where really that's the target you don't want to be moving or doing things, because it double attacks with 2-handed weapons, these kinds of crazy things. So constitution roll is a little awkward, but it's still there. And for my shove build, I use this minimally because I'm mostly just throwing things off the edge. But if you want to understand what really the power of monk is, it's this. And if you get good rolls on your constitution defense, then it's amazing how it transforms a battlefield. Forcing another enemy to not have a turn is gigantic in Baldur's Gate. Anyways, we can also replace a spell, but that brings us to the end of where my character's at. I'm only level 5, actually. Way of the 4 Elements monk scales up the capacity and strength of those mage spells, so you get more access to different versions of them. But let me just show you what these are doing for me in actual gameplay. You can see here the reticle. I have some footage I'll put up too in the background, moving things around. This is the most common one I use, the Way of the 4 Thunders, because of the reticle. It means it gives me a good range on where mobs are, and its saving throw, even though Constitution, for me, seems to have better payoffs. This is also the one that, generally speaking, gets the most play because of the way AoE is structured in the game, so targets coming around you. But I would say that I have used a number of times this one as well, because look at the range on the straight line that you're able. It's like Tetris, basically, right? We have the the rectangle, and you've got the long line coming down. There are moments where I want to be able to hit a number of targets in a line, and this has been amazing for that. It also clears gas. So, forget, what is it in Underdark? There's like the Grim. There's a gas cloud that comes up a couple times. You can just press this spell and clear the gas out of it. Kind of neat. Finally, Fist of the Unbroken Air as a ranged ability. You see the reticle here. You can be pretty far away from targets and still produce the same shove mechanic. So all 3 of these are doing that work. And they produce a couple of other pieces. Prone is quite useful. Actually, off balance is even better because you lower their capacity to deal with certain kinds of rolls. So disadvantage to strength and dexterity checks is kind of good too. But these are aside. Really, the value of these, in my opinion, moving them around the battlefield. You also have access to just your general shove, which is going to do an athletics check, strength based, and really works well when you're crouched. So if you can approach a mob, let's see if we can do it here on Arabella just for the sake of fun. You can see when I am crouched or in stealth, my shove is going to have a 96% chance. And you can see my athletics is saying it'll move for that far. Wither's only that far. If I don't have it, maybe it depends on how Arabella is. I guess I'm just that good. So 96% chance is high because Arabella is just a neutral target and I shouldn't be shoving her. But the point is that depending on the target's weight, you will need to use athletics checks, and being crouched really increases your capacity to do this, or being stealth. So invisibility counts as well. Now, there are some targets, of course, that can't be shoved because they're too large, like ogres. So we have to use these other. There's no other way to do it for a monk other than to use Fist of the Four Thunders, or Rush of the Gale Spirits, or Fist of the Unbroken Air. Just be aware that you have these as real tools to deal with moments when a target is too large. I think I have an ogre example here of using it in my kit. The other thing I want to talk about is why Monk is interesting to me from an action and bonus action standpoint. As I mentioned before, things like dash are replicated in our bonus action slot with dash over here, Step of the Wind. But it's also relevant that our key spenders or our items are bonus actions as well. And this gameplay is interesting because the weight of Monk's power actually is not necessarily in its main hand attack. Though if you go the strength build, it's there as well. But it's really loaded up into flurry of blows melee attacks. This is where a lot of the damage is, or it's loaded up into your stunning strike, or the open hand monk has another version of just your regular hit or your offhand hit. So if you do a melee attack, you get the opportunity for a bonus melee attack. That's the bonus action side of monk, is where a lot of the power is. So you really want to think very clearly about what you're doing before you just use items. So using a greater healing potion, for example, is a huge loss of your capacity to do damage or your capacity to move things around. You also have sometimes Fist of the Four Thunders is your action ability, which means that you get a lot of extra utility out of bonus pieces, like using your Step of the Wind to get dash. So you can still perform a movement ability and get away with the normal dash feature. Do you see what I'm saying? So knowing where your bonus action is the more valuable thing to be using, and knowing where your action is the most valuable, is really important. And for shove, for the shove build, what I love is that you basically have access to both in a given turn. You're going to be shoving things so that you can shove them again. And I'll start to show some footage in the background so you can see what I'm talking about here. Let's pull up the combo where I show you how to shove something pretty far. I think this is it here, long distance shoving. So you can see here, we're just out exploring. We've got our torch because I haven't got the blessing yet. And we have some mobs that have chased us along. You can see how far, for example, this is to a cliff. You see that off to the right side, we have a cliff. I'm going to shove this creature up a little bit so that I can move it forward. So my shove succeeds the athletics check. I move up here. And then what I'm going to do is hit them again. But this time I'm going to use my other ability. So I've used both my bonus action and I'm going to use my action. You can see the reticle here will show you when your skill is going to launch them off the edge. It sort of loops down over the edge. Fire that off, bang, off he goes, displaced, get the XP, and you can run. That's a good example. Let me pull up the ogre. I'll show you. So when you're in the castle, you can also push things off the edge. Yeah, I've brought this mob down. with an attack, I can't use my bonus action to shove. So what I did was I used my bonus action on dash to get all the way down here. The mob chases you down with their own dash, using up basically their own capacity, and then you can just turn and blast them off the edge. I actually gotta level up for that. So you get good experience because you're just knocking things off the edge all the time. Another example, the mobs that were in here before are also in this video. Where is it? I think it's. So these mobs here can also be dealt with in the same way. If you talk to them or if you stealth near them, one will walk away. Common tactic for me is to pickpocket. And actually, let me talk about it first before I get into this. But the common tactic to use if you want to do the shove build is to start by going up to the target, and since you want to be crouched or stealth to give you the extra bonus to your athletics check, what you want to do is stealth first, get yourself into position, and then if it's something you can pickpocket because they move around a lot, you press shift spacebar to get yourself into turn-based mode. Now you haven't taken any actions within your turn-based mode. Anything you do from now on is going to cost you. You see the 3.1 meters. If I move that, it's going to drain my movement. If I press an ability like a potion at this time, it's going to use up my bonus action. It's really important that before you press shift space to go into this mode, you already have your plan. So I'm going to walk up here. I can pickpocket, and it's not producing an effect in real time for the other mobs. The environment still needs to wait, or the mob needs to wait until you're done your turn. So then you can shove, box, boom. I displaced it, but it doesn't push it anywhere. I can then shove, box again, my ability, and it's still my turn. All of that can be done within that, and then after the mob is gone, you can just press shift space again, and you're back to your normal gameplay. That makes sense. So you want to be crouched first, because if you press crouch while you're within spacebar, it will mess it up. So let me show you. If I'm in turn base and I press crouch, I've used up my bonus action. So now I can't shove anything. Or I've used up my action, excuse me, not my bonus action. I've used up my action. So now I can't do any of my shoving skills. I can just do a normal shove. Instead, get to where you need to go. Oh, see, the environment's turn. I forgot to press spacebar. So I'm running around. I know, oh, here's a target over here. I go into my cloak. Here's a target, Minthara. You can see where her reticles are. Maybe we're not into our shift space yet, so we can move around freely. Maybe we'll see if we creep past her. We're passing stealth checks perhaps, or you could jump if you want to get to the other side. So jump takes you over the creature. You can see you're going here, jump again. Now you're on this side of them. Now you press your turn-based mode. So you're in the right space now to know what you want to do. That's how I tend to approach it, because that way you have all of your abilities, both your action and bonus action, available to you, and you're not interrupted by the other mobs. So I'll go back to the Moonrise Tower and you can see how this works with pickpocketing. Specifically, I stealth first, get the red reticles, because he might turn around. I use my turn-based mode, pick his pocket, shove him off the edge. And you can see, come to the end here, we go and chase his mob around. So I go and hide here. Again, I'm outside of turn-based mode. I'm just waiting. You can see the reticle coming down. I'm out of range. You're waiting for him to come up. And then as soon as he gets pretty close to the wall, I activate turn-based mode. Come up to pickpocket. I know he's not going to move. And you can shove him off. Now, if you fail the pickpocket, they will cancel turn-based mode and cost you. So just be aware of that, but that's essentially how that works. Works for necromites as well on the bridge. I also shoved off Suzdera, which maybe is going to be a problem later, but I'm just having too much fun with this. You can see this lady up here who halts you from coming up the steps. You're not really supposed to be in this area, but I managed to get up here, and I just, 88%. That's because I'm stealthed. If I wasn't stealth, it would be far less. So using that tactic of crouching or stealthing, then entering turn-based mode is the way to go. Here's an example of surprise tactics. So what I want to show you here is I use, from invisibility or stealth, my spell. So I used, excuse me, let's go back here so you can see. I used the Way of the Four Thunders, or Fist of the Four Thunders, and I'm in stealth or cloaked. What is this going to do at the beginning of combat? If there's no dialogue, what ends up happening is your opponents are surprised, even if I don't move them. So in this case, he got displaced, but he didn't get shoved. So he rolled and saved against the Fist of the Four Thunders shove. I have initiative. He's surprised. I get another whole turn. What does that mean? I can do it again. The enemy's surprised. Bang. Off he goes. That's an interesting point for when you're fighting mobs that aren't going to initiate dialogue. So a lot of the fights actually do initiate dialogue, and you either have to get through that and run away and come back and deal with the fight, or you're just out fighting mobs somewhere in the world and you need to engage them and they're just enemies. So this effect is really useful because you essentially get 2 turns if you end up surprising your opponents. I just want to make a note about Water Whip here. So I tried to use Water Whip on this boss, and remember, Water Whip is a strength save, so its chance here you can see is at 25%, which is quite low. And that's fine. There's going to be some times where that's not useful. But what Water Whip is interesting is it will bring a target to right nearby you. If you're on a ledge, the target will fall down. So it's another kind of shove or movement mechanic that you can use within the Way of the Four Elements kit. You just fire it off. It would normally pull you. In this case, you can see I screwed up and didn't achieve it. But Water Whip's actually quite good. I ended up shoving the Warden, I think, here. So the Warden will walk around, you can just shove her off the edge, and it puts you in combat. One of the things that's really lovely about the shove gameplay is even if you're in combat and need to get away, shoving as a bonus action means that you can do normal actions to move yourself out of the way. So you can do things like, invisibility. You can get a long way away. You can step with all your abilities. You can run. Monk's got a lot of range, right? Depending on skill. So my encouragement to you is, even if you're in the densest, craziest part of battle and you've got all kinds of mobs around you, you can almost always shove one, run away, and get away because you have superior movement. So you can even hit these scrying eyes. Did you know that? You can shove scrying eyes off the edge. They're floating, but didn't work that time. And I'm like, well, okay. That didn't work. I'm like, it succeeded, but it didn't move him. Well, this was me testing, by the way. Scrying eyes can't be shoved off the edge. Hold on a second. Why don't I just try my normal ability? Ding. There he goes. 140 XP is actually quite a lot of XP. So if you're thinking, how do you ever get anything done in this game? You're obviously lower level. This is true, but I've been just running right through the campaign, shoving everything. You don't really need levels to do it, but you get a lot of XP if you want to spend the time instead of hacking and slashing. Just come up and just like elbow something off the edge. 140 XP. There's other circumstances too. I have put it in this video. Maybe I'll grab them in a second. But while you're watching, this is another fight, the Ur fight. So this is a fight where you're really just thinking as a monk about how to move around the battlefield, because what you really want to be doing is blowing these guys up. Unless you do the dialogue for him to kill his companions, I suggest trying this out instead. And the way that this is achieved actually has a lot more to do with the monk's kit than it does anything else. And what I mean by that is, if you look at how patient defense works, if you look at how our passive buffs work, our ability to deflect arrows, what this guy will do, this giant Orthon ogre dude, he will fire a cluster of bombs at you that you can then pick up on your turn. And because you have a ton of initiative as a Dex monk player, you get turn 2. So he fires these little cluster bombs at you, and then he fires a bolt. And sometimes he fires them at you, and if there's a cluster bomb near you, it'll blow them all up and kill you. But you can deflect it due to your passives. So you have, in this case, deflect missiles, and I also think I had another capacity to do that as well. Where is it? Something else on that lets me deflect them. It doesn't matter. Deflect missiles is enough, and you can stop the damage and stop it from hitting the bombs. So you collect all those bombs, and then as a monk, you just run away. You just run away with the bombs all the way down the corridor. Get as far away from this guy as you can. And then you come back up, you set the bombs, and then move them around into the area till they're all around him. You see these little yellow pieces all on the ground. And then you stand at a distance as a monk and you lob them in. One thing that's interesting, notice how throw is granting me, due to my character's level, an extra attack. Throw counts, so you can double throw and blow things up even more if you need to. Lots of interesting ways to do it, but one of the beauties of Monk is the stealth allows you to get close enough to move those bombs around, and then the capacity to defend yourself, to dodge attacks, means that that initial setting of bombs will be able to be collected by you before he blows you up. Actually, I think you could probably collect the bombs, run away, shove the doggy off the edge. That's what I did. I just ran away and the dog chased me, and then I shoved it off into the abyss, and then go back and reset combat. And he'll do the same thing again at the beginning of combat. He'll fire his cluster bombs at you, try to shoot them or shoot you, and go invisible. And you can collect them and run away. You could probably just farm him for infinite bombs. I'm guessing someone will do this, and then take those bombs to like some crazy boss fight at the end, place them, lay them all on the ground, which doesn't require any action points, by the way. You can just drop items in the middle of combat. So if I'll show you here on the screen. If you're in the middle of combat and you go into turn-based mode, dropping an item does not produce any kind of action or bonus action. You can drop anything you'd like. You can drop books, you can drop bombs, whatever. Doesn't matter. Once it's on the ground, if you hold Alt, you'll see where you've put it all. There's the plans for Baldur's Gate. And you can left click and move it. You see the little green arrow? That's allowing me to move this around the battlefield. You can kind of swoop it pretty far from yourself. If you hold, I've moved it all the way over there, and I haven't even moved my character, so I've wasted no movement points, no action points. With those proximity bombs, they will explode whenever you hit them with fire or another explosion, so you can stack them all up in one pile in your inventory, like shovels, or you can drop the skulls like this, and you find them on the ground. This is all, you haven't moved anywhere. You find them on the ground wherever they are, you move them. There's the skulls there. You grab the skulls, you can move them on this side of yourself and then move them again, get them right to the edge of where you could reach before you have to move, and then you can move them a long way. See that? So the range that I can get them, what is that, almost 4 to 7 meters away from me, depending on how far you push them. You can set all the bombs out before combat starts, and then you can engage combat and throw another bomb in there, or you can just stand back here before combat even begins. And what Monk lets you do with the high dexterity, this would be true for Rogue as well, is get in close, but also deflect any damage that's going to hit you in that first round. You can do a patient defense, and then before it begins, you can be sure that the first attacks that come into you aren't going to do anything that allows you to set up for that moment. Let me show you, I think I produced a video that shows this more truly. The boxes that I put, I believe I put together in a compilation these boxes here. So you can see I'm shoving the boxes, the mimics in this one part. I'm using all of the different skills to do it. The mimics don't have a high strength, so you can push them around with your strength roll version. So there was the one skill that I'm using, our Fist of the Unbroken Air. Up there. And then we use Rush of the Gale Winds to sort of show off this reticle specifically, see how far away the second mimic is. I want to slowly line it up so that I get it where it's not going to push one just onto the edge, but both will potentially go off. It only hits the one, no problem. We just run away, and then eventually we can push it. And my athletics check wasn't even that high, but I think I didn't have my strength item on. One other, maybe I'll show you the other major battle that I did, or I'll show you the last two. One is our fight with the lantern dude that you're supposed to actually kill, but you don't need to kill. And the other is the fight with Marcus. So let me just find that one first. Here we are. We've got the battle against the Moon Lantern holder here, Harness. This is a patrol. You can pick up some druids to help you, but if you're a solo monk that's like level 4 or something, you can still accomplish this task by clearing them out. You don't actually even have to engage with these guys to continue on to Moonrise Towers. The thing about monk is you can just run all the way to Moonrise Towers, right through the darkness, not encountering anything, just because of how much movement speed you have if you do it right. So that's what I did. I just said, screw this guy. Actually, I'll be a little more transparent. I didn't know that I would not be able to collect the lantern after this, or how important it would be. I just said, I'm gonna punch him off the edge. And one thing about this fight is he has Sanctuary. So you can see Sanctuary is making it so that Karnas cannot be targeted by spells or abilities, but we're doing an AoE attack here, and he's too big to shove. So our AoE attack is really what's valuable here, just shoving him right down into that ledge. And what I did afterwards is I just ran away. The dogs will chase you, but you can go invisible and get out of their way, and then they'll despawn. You can also just run away and then selectively shove targets off of the edge if you need to as they come. It's really not that difficult to organize yourself to do that in different pieces. You just wait till they come along the bridge, come by, shove them off, that kind of thing. Really funny gameplay. The other piece I'll show you is the Marcus fight. So Flaming Fist Marcus is really difficult for shove builds, and the reason why, you'll see here I'm shoving him off the edge, but if you do this the normal way by going up the stairs, Marcus will be in the room and Isabel will be out here on the balcony, which means that any ability you use, like the one I'm about to do, the Fist of the Four Thunders, this will knock her off the edge too, and she takes a crap load of damage from shove. So you can't really rely on the Fist of the Unbroken Air because it's a strength save, which is again back to this conversation about what ability to use in which situation. Strength rolls versus your athletics through a shove versus the Fist of the Four Thunders, which is a Constitution save. In both cases, actually, he's got high Constitution, high Strength. So it took some planning to do this properly, but I wanted to have a legitimate run where I just relied on making sure I shove things. And this is a great example of a battle where you have to use a lot of different tools and think through the steps. After he gets shoved on the edge, he has to run all the way around into the beginning of the space. And we can guard Isabel by basically running interference through our shove tactics. So you'll see here, we get these gargoyles that are coming in. We make sure we line them all up into this region. We shove this one. Again, we used our bonus action, and now we get to use our shove as a normal action. Our fist will knock these guys into this bottom layer. So that allows the other characters like Jaheira to come into play. And what we're doing here is really valuable. Notice how I'm finding exactly where the reticle is going to be so that I don't hit Isabel. You can see the 3 red mobs that are lined up. I know one of them's going off for sure, but I really just want to ensure that I'm not knocking Isabel down into that area. So off we go. We happen to hit 2, which is great. That's enough for us to sort of get in position to fight her. And then this final piece, while they're dealing with everything downstairs, I get in an attack, I shove him out of the way, and then what I'm going to do is want to step in between me and Isabel so that this target has to move past me, then I get a attack off so that Isabel is safe. So all these other mobs do quite a lot of damage from up top here. And eventually you get down here to where Marcus is, and Marcus will come all the way up stairs to get to Isabel, who will usually be up here in the rafters trying to fire at him as he comes through the front area. So if you come down the stairs, you can keep pushing him along and sort of displacing him, or just making yourself a target so that others can do damage. And as a monk, you can just put on your defenses, stand there and hit him, and eventually he will die. That kind of brings us to the end of where I'm at as a Way of the Four Elements monk. And I know this has been somewhat of a longer video. I'll talk a little bit about items and why I chose the orc before I close. And it's really relevant because a lot of the time when you're playing solo in the game, you cannot waste actions and bonus actions. You have to be very clear with yourself in any kind of encounter. Where am I using my bonus action? Is it going to be shove this turn? Okay, no. Okay. Is it going to be an item? These are the sorts of things that are very relevant for us because you don't have anyone else to rely on. And the other thing that's really valuable for me as an orc, you get the capacity to have one turn of recovery. So if you get, essentially it's a cheat death. You get knocked out down in combat, you get put back to 1 health, which is often really relevant for shoving because I don't really care about my absolute health or my constitution. I just care that I can get my shove mechanics off. So if I get to another turn because some guy took a giant two-handed axe swing and cleaved me and did 15 damage and knocked me out, I get that one turn to get 1 health back and recovery, and I can shove him off the edge. So that's why I've chosen Orc. I wouldn't recommend it. Wood Elf seems a little bit better, a bit more movement speed, and also I wouldn't necessarily recommend you go for the, what did I choose, Urchin or something that gives me survival, I think was what I chose. So there's just reasons from a solo gameplay perspective that I chose things like survival and acrobatics to complement my character. But I wouldn't suggest that for everybody. As far as items go, the most valuable item probably to get early on is Corellin's Grace. This gives you a little bit of a step up, and it's actually maybe even scales okay. I'll have to check with the other people who did the other monk ability for the open hand. Maybe this is actually just a damage amp because you get +1 bonus to unarmed attack rolls and damage, which means you're going to hit more often with your unarmed stuff. And you also get bonus to saving rolls, which is really important for my build because again, you'll often be in combat surrounded by 4 or 5 creatures before you get your combo off, and you want to make sure you have good saving rolls. So that's useful. I found there's a lot of good boots, anything that gives you movement, but Misty Step is kind of busted for what I want to do. You can get off into really weird parts of the game and skip entire encounters. Misty Step has a really long range, so this is important for me to have somewhere in my kit, and I just happen to have it alongside my build. I don't think Nightwalkers is that important for monks specifically, but this is why I have it. The other major piece that you want to be getting for shoving things is the Mighty Cloth. Bull Strength, the ability Bull Rush is a shove. It's not that relevant because it is, again, an entire action that we're using, and action and bonus action are quite relevant choice makers in this game. But +2 to strength is really good for athletic checks. It's really good for just stats in general. It allows us to index into dexterity and wisdom and still shove fairly reasonably. So that's why it's there. You can get a Cloak of Protection for armor class. Great. Haste Helm for momentum. I can't find something that's better than this. Again, what momentum tells you is you get movement speed at the beginning, and it removes anything like prone, restrained, incapacitated, so that the start of your fight is really in your control. You can't be slowed down. Other mechanics won't mess you up. If you walk into a space that has these things, or you get hit first, they have better initiative. You're still going to be good. I try to get utility pieces like invisibility. So I have invisibility on both of my rings. This allows me to get in and out and move around if I like. Lots of other good ring options too. And this Absolute's Talisman from that gnome I found is pretty good because it gives you saving throws against death. And but again, this is just me running around finding stuff. I'm not specifically aiming at talismans. I actually don't even know if there are better amulets. There's probably a host of them that I haven't even run into. I'm just running around shoving things off the edge, guys. I don't care. Like, you almost could do this naked. Missile snaring. Oh, here's where the other missile snaring was. So you have it naturally as monk. This allows you to have another option for it. There's other gloves that are better than this, guys. This is what I have going on. So lots of cool options. As far as items, ones that are really useful are the potion of movement speed, which is going to be good. Again, if you don't know what the alchemy is in this game, you should go check out some of what alchemy is doing for you. Um, it basically gives you access to making your own potions. Potion of invisibility is also quite useful. Other items like bombs that I was showing you before, also really useful. So if you can pick up a bunch of bombs to help modify your gameplay, anything that can help disrupt or move things around or that you can use as setup, like a rogue style, is really good. Other things like scrolls are extremely strong. Cone Cold's fine, but things like Hold Person, really good. Things like banishment, also really nice to have for just specific kinds of encounters where you know it's a target that can't save versus you can turn an undead here or you this kind of thing. Having extra movement in your capacity is fine as well. So that's just a range of items. I'm more experimenting than anything. I'm not really giving you a guide on which items you must get, but if you want a solo experience that is really bizarre or unique, definitely check out Monk for Way of the Four Elements and try shoving things around. Before I close, Illithid Powers are somewhat relevant. You can get a little bit of damage through the displacement passive. That's good. Force Tunnel is okay, and Repulsor, because it's a strength save, is sometimes more relevant than the other ones. Again, you have to think about what kind of mob you're facing. So you have Gale of Spirits and Unbroken Air, which are also strength saves, but you might find that you have a better shot at doing the AoE side to push them around with this strength save, um, versus say the Constitution save of Fist of the Thunder. So just be aware that you might prefer Repulsor sometimes in certain circumstances where you know the target has a crap load of Constitution but not a lot of strength. Or maybe they have, you know, I don't know. Maybe the reticle is better. So if you're doing strength stuff, you can see this is the area that it's going to blow them off. You want that kind of effect instead of this kind of effect, instead of a singular target being hit off. These are all the utility side of your Illithid powers. You can charm things if you want, that's probably fine. But as far as doing your passive skills, nothing except for displacement is really that useful. These ones are just good in terms of gameplay in general. So if you're doing the Fist Monk where you're blasting things, definitely get favorable beginnings and Luck of the Far Realms because you'll just start completely slamming targets. That's all for this. I think that's all the stuff I wanted to cover, guys. Again, think about Monk as being this real interesting gameplay between action and bonus action. Some of these things, priorities getting flipped. As a solo player, you have to really be careful about that. But also think a lot about what your skills are interacting with. Is it their strength roll? Is it their constitution roll? Or is it their dexterity roll? What's important here? These things are all very relevant for what you're doing. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll try to keep putting footage of my shove shenanigans as I make my way through. Maybe I'll go back to Act 1 later on and try to organize some giant pull in areas I haven't gone to, like shoving a crap load of goblins off the edge and capture it for you. If you like this content, let me know in the comments and I will do my best to answer any questions that you have. Other than that, guys, thank you very much for watching and we will see you